down in disarray. Egypt no more wants democratization than any other country in the Middle East really wants democratization. But the class systems in these places are still very, very strong. It's almost like a caste system, actually. The Indian subcontinent, as some of you come from there know, it's almost a caste system. So, in any event, you have to know the culture of these areas to probably make much headway. And I don't think the American State Department or others are really into culture. They're into immediate policies that do not necessarily bring fruit. So the Mamluks' experience in Egypt has to be something that is understood as a long-term situation. Napoleon, in 1800, for some unknown, crazy, insane reason, went to Egypt and overthrew the Mamluk system. But after he left, it just basically reinstated itself. And even though he had an impact on Egyptian society in the Middle East and started a lot of Egyptian nationalism and modernization, and he did, the old system was only dented, it wasn't broken. It was only slightly, cracked. Why did Napoleon go to Egypt in the 1800 period? He was attacking the English. He didn't want the English to have an easy route to India. He wanted to make the English go around the Horn of Africa to get to their rich colonies in the East. He wanted to cut off the Indian trade from the British. That make it difficult. If you got to go around the Horn of Africa with sailboats, you got a long way to go. You've got a long way to go. Steam is a little better. But even with steam, they dug the Suez Canal in the 1860s and 70s to allow the ships to get to India and ports further east quicker, which has been the center of a lot of political fighting, infighting, real fighting, back and forth, one way or the other, over the last century after that. The French built it. But the English took it over again when they took over. Basically, the English took over India in around 1880 through various manipulations and machinations having to do with the canal. But they didn't fight to take over Egypt. They just basically took it over. Let's pass around a roll sheet. Can you rip out a piece of paper? And because I don't know where I keep leaving my roll sheets in another notebook. That's my only way to keep a check on the people who are sloughing off in the class here. So that brings us up to the modern period where Egypt goes. Now, the Mamluk invasion, I told you, had a huge effect on the Arab Islamic world because, as I explained to you, they followed a scorched earth policies, and places that they conquered took a long time to recover, like Baghdad. Baghdad was taken by the Mongols, as we told you, in 1257. And aside from all the other dislocations that were going on, breakdown under the Buyids, who in the 900s were already taking over, the Seljuks in the 1000s. You remember the Buyids were a Shiite dynasty from Iran who took over. They left the Caliph there. The Seljuks in the 1000s were a Turkish tribe, late 1000s into the Crusading period. These are Persians, these are Turks. They were still fighting people. So by this time the Arabs had stopped fighting and had become more of a citified gentry, feat, if you like, not really able to do serious fighting, maybe assassination or something like that, but not, mechanized fighting. And they left this to new Muslims like the Turks who came in and were prepared to do this sort of thing. And the Turks continued to do this thing for 1,000 years. The Turks are still doing it. Turks, like it or not, have the best army in the Middle East. The Turks helped stop the Russian expansion through the Caucasus. back in the Cold War days. The Turks fought in the Korean War. We've got great honor in the Korean War as part of the UN contingent there. Everyone who was on the UN contingent in the Korean War recognized that the Turks were some of the best fighters who were out there. The Turks stopped the British in the Dardanelles campaign in the First World War with tremendous casualties, almost destroyed Winston Churchill's career. The Turks are just well known for being terribly, stubborn fighters. And one assumes that they still continue in that mode up to the present day. They've become more nationalist. They're not part of the caliphate situation anymore. They have a modern country they call Turkey, which is an Ottoman successor state. But at the time the Seljuks came in, they were literally the fighters now. They were, to some extent, Islamicized paid mercenaries. And together with other groups in northern Iraq, like the Kurds, who were a quasi-Turkish group or somewhat related to the Turks, these people fought the Crusaders. They were the ones that fought the Crusaders. It wasn't Arab armies per se. Salah ad-Din, well, even though he's a famous Arab hero, he's not an Arab. Salah ad-Din is a Kurd, and so on and so forth. So the Crusaders were coming in the 1100s in northern Syria, pushed by the Byzantines there. The Mongols from the east were pushing the Turks westward. All this was overwhelming the Arab caliphates in the 10, 11, 1200 period. And by 1257 then was the death blow to the caliphate. The caliphate, was staggering. It had been, taking tremendous blows. It was surviving only by the leave of these generous amirs and sultans, Persian Buyids, Seljuk Turks, who wanted to keep the caliph as a figure. But after 1257, there was no more caliphate. The Abbasid caliphate collapsed, and there was no more Baghdad. It was burned to the ground, and everybody was killed. Everybody was killed. It was scorched earth policy. And that's the point. As I told you, the center of the Arab world moved further west, behind the shield of the Mamluks. In other words, if you're going to have crazy warriors from another side, you've got to hire your own crazy warriors to fight them. So again, it wasn't the Egyptians per se who were doing the fighting. It was these levies of Islamized children from the Balkans and the Caucasus who were doing the fighting. So if you want to get an army to withstand another army that's very brutal and tough, you got to get some brutal and tough people. The Arabs were never this way. And frankly, to the present day, still probably aren't.